Hello, my name is Jan. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived a life full of love, sacrifice, and lessons I never thought I'd need to learn. Today, I want to tell you about a time that broke me completely. A time when my own son did something I never imagined he would. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. Life wasn't always easy, but my family had love, and that made everything feel possible. My husband, Robert, was a gentle, hard-working man. He had calloused hands from years of labor and a smile that could make you feel safe in any storm. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had dreams, laughter, and a house that smelled of fresh bread every Sunday. When Ethan was born, our world changed. I remember holding him in my arms for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and feeling a love so fierce it scared me. I promised him then, silently, that no matter what, I would do everything I could to give him the life he deserved. But life has its own plans, and tragedy came early. My husband passed away when Ethan was just 10 years old. I was devastated, of course, but I couldn't stop for long. I had a little boy who needed me, and I had to become both mother and father. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes leaving the house before sunrise and returning late at night. I cleaned homes in the mornings and waited tables in the evenings. Most days, I was exhausted, but seeing Ethan happy, learning, growing, made it worth it. Every sacrifice I made, every sleepless night, every aching muscle, it was all for him. Ethan grew up strong, clever, and ambitious. He had his father's determination and his own spark of curiosity. He made friends easily, charmed teachers, and had dreams bigger than I ever imagined. I remember the night he graduated high school. I couldn't stop crying. Tears of joy, pride, fear, and a little sadness that my baby was growing up and leaving my arms slowly. I told him, Ethan, I just want you to be happy. I'll always be here for you, no matter what. And he promised, Mom, I'll take care of you. I'll make you proud. I believed him. I believed every word because I had no reason not to. He was my son, and I had raised him with every ounce of love I had. Then came Olivia. She was beautiful, confident, stylish, the kind of woman who turns heads when she enters a room. I tried to like her. I really did. I wanted Ethan to be happy, and I told myself that if she made him smile, that was enough. But there was always something distant in her presence, a coldness I couldn't quite explain. I pushed those feelings aside because Ethan seemed happy, and that's what mattered most. Years passed. Ethan married Olivia, and they moved to the city. Our visits became shorter, less frequent. Each time they came home, it was rushed. He checked his phone constantly, glancing at messages or emails. conversations felt hurried, and I began to notice a growing distance between us. I tried to convince myself that he was busy, that he was just building a life, that it wasn't personal. But deep down, I felt a knot in my chest every time I left him at the airport after a visit. Then came the morning that changed everything. I woke up to unfamiliar voices echoing through the living room. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but when I walked into the room, I froze. Men were moving my furniture out the front door, my sofa, my dining table, my husband's old rocking chair, even the cabinet Robert had built with his own hands. Every piece of furniture, every memory, was being carried away. I shouted, "Stop! What are you doing? That's mine." One of the men looked at me blankly. "Ma'am, your son ordered everything sold." I felt my knees buckle. Sold, sold. How could he sell my things? This is my house. I grabbed my phone and called. "Ethan." My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the device. When he answered, his voice was calm, almost detached. "Mom," he said, "don't worry. Olivia and I are moving to Paris. We thought it was time for you to downsize. We sold the furniture and sent you the money." Downsize, sent the money. Those words felt like a dagger. He left me standing in an empty house, my sanctuary stripped of everything I had built, everything I had cherished. I sank to the floor, staring at the barren walls. Each echo reminded me of laughter that used to fill the rooms, holidays celebrated, and quiet Sunday mornings. Every memory, every little piece of my life was gone. I cried until I couldn't breathe, not because of the furniture, but because the boy I had raised, the boy I had given my entire life for, had left me behind without a second thought. Days passed. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I wandered through the empty rooms like a ghost. The silence was deafening, and every corner reminded me of what I had lost. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made, all the nights I had worked until my body ached so my son could have a better life. And now this, and yet, amidst the grief, a small spark of determination began to grow. If I had survived losing Robert, raising Ethan alone, and working myself to exhaustion, then I could survive this too. I would find a way to live again. I started slowly, bought a small table, a chair, a lamp. I began making coffee in the morning, sitting in that tiny corner and looking out the window. I began talking to neighbors again, meeting people at the store, sharing small fragments of my story with anyone who would listen. Little by little, the emptiness began to fade. I realized life wasn't over. I was still here, and that meant I could still live. Months passed. I didn't hear from Ethan until one evening. His voice, hesitant and nervous, came through the phone. "Mom, I know what I did hurt you. I see it now. I'm sorry. I listened, and I forgave him. Holding on to anger would have destroyed me far more than the empty house ever could. After that day, when Ethan sold everything and left for Paris, my life changed in ways I never thought possible. I thought I knew what loneliness was before, but living in an empty house, stripped of memories and furniture, showed me a deeper kind of solitude. The first few nights were unbearable. I couldn't sleep. Every sound echoed through the empty walls. The creak of the floorboards, the wind outside, the faint hum of the refrigerator. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering Ethan's laughter, his small hands in mine, the way he used to curl up next to me when he was scared of thunderstorms. And then I'd think about the cold emptiness of the living room, the bare floor where my sofa used to be, the table where we shared countless meals, the cabinet that held every memory of our family. It was all gone. I tried to distract myself. I cleaned. I walked through the house, rearranging things that weren't even furniture, my few belongings, the old lamp, my books. But nothing helped. The silence was too loud. I began to reflect on the years I had spent raising Ethan. I remembered the nights I worked 2 jobs while he slept peacefully. The mornings I made pancakes even when I hadn't slept a wink. The weekends spent helping him with homework, attending his school plays, teaching him to ride a bike. Every moment had been filled with love and sacrifice, and now it felt like none of it mattered. I thought about Ethan as a child, the way his eyes lit up when he learned something new, the way he would hug me tightly when he was scared, the way he used to say, "Mom, I love you more than anyone in the world." I remembered teaching him to read, to tie his shoes, to dream big. And I remembered the day his father died, how we both cried together, clinging to each other as if our lives depended on it. That memory was a balm and a wound all at once. Days turned into weeks. I barely left the house. I didn't want to see people, didn't want to hear the world moving on while my life felt frozen. I would sit by the window for hours, watching neighbors pass, the seasons change, the wind shake the bare trees. The quiet made me feel small, invisible, and yet it also gave me time to think. I thought about forgiveness. I thought about anger. I thought about love. How could the boy I had nurtured, the man I had raised with every ounce of my being, do this to me? How could he leave me in a house stripped of warmth and memories? And yet, I remembered something my husband used to say, "Laura, love is stronger than anger, stronger than grief. It survives even the worst of storms." I didn't know if I believed it yet. One afternoon, while sipping tea at the little corner of the kitchen that still felt like mine, I decided to take a small step. I walked down to the thrift store in town and bought a chair and a small table. It wasn't much, but it was something solid to sit on, to make this house feel like home again. I started placing my few belongings around, arranging books, small keepsakes, and photographs I had kept in drawers. It was slow, it was painful, but it was a start. Neighbors began noticing me again. Mrs. Henderson, who lived 2 doors down, stopped by one afternoon with a pie. Thought you could use something sweet, she said, smiling kindly. I thanked her, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a little warmth. Small connections like that became my lifeline. I also started writing again. Not letters to Ethan, though I thought about him constantly, but journals. I wrote down my memories, my heartbreak, my regrets, my hopes. I wrote about Ethan as a boy, about my husband Robert, about the life I had built and lost. Writing became a therapy, a way to speak without being judged, a way to keep my mind alive when my body felt heavy with grief. At night, I would sit in my chair by the window, sipping tea and staring at the moon. I thought about forgiveness. I thought about Ethan. And slowly, over weeks and months, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope didn't come all at once. It came in little bursts, the smile of a neighbor, the warmth of sunlight on my face, the quiet satisfaction of finishing a journal entry, the way a cup of coffee could make me feel alive again. And with each day, the house felt a little less empty. Not because the furniture was back, not because my son had returned, but because I was starting to fill it with my own strength, my own life, my own voice. I also remembered my son, Ethan, in a different light, not just as the boy who left me behind, but as the man I had raised. The person capable of mistakes, the person capable of change. I realized that my love for him didn't disappear with betrayal. Love doesn't work that way. It survives, even when trust is broken. And then one morning, months after the day that had felt like the end of my world, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived from Ethan. It wasn't long. He wrote that he had made mistakes, that he hadn't thought through his actions, and that he missed me more than he could ever express. He didn't ask for forgiveness, he simply admitted his faults and wanted to reconnect. I held that letter for hours, trembling. Anger and hurt surged through me, but so did a tiny flicker of understanding. Perhaps he was trying, in his own way, to make things right. Perhaps it wasn't too late. From that day forward, I started imagining a future where we could rebuild our bond. I didn't know when or how it would happen, but I believed it could. After the shock, the heartbreak, and the emptiness of those first few months, I began to discover something I hadn't realized before. Life doesn't end when someone hurts you, no matter how much you love them. The first step in rebuilding was simple, yet it felt monumental. Routines. I began waking up earlier, making breakfast for myself, even though it felt strange to eat alone. I planted a few flowers. In the front yard, a small burst of color to remind me that life keeps moving. Watering them each morning became a meditation, a symbol that even in a barren house, life could bloom again. I also started walking through the neighborhood more. At first, it was only to the corner store, then to the small park nearby. I met people I hadn't noticed before. Mr. Jacobs, who was retired and loved to tell stories about his travels. A young woman named Sarah, who walked her dog every morning. And a kind man named Daniel, who owned the local cafe. They didn't know my story, and I didn't tell them everything at first. But as the days passed, I shared bits and pieces. Their empathy and kindness reminded me that the world wasn't entirely cruel. That connection still existed. I threw myself into small projects at home. I repainted the living room walls a soft, comforting shade of cream. I found old shelves at a thrift store and filled them with books and mementos that reminded me of better times. I even started cooking again, experimenting with new recipes, baking cookies, and savoring the aromas that once felt like home. These were small victories, but each one reminded me that I was still capable, still alive, still myself. In the evenings, I began reflecting deeply on my past. Memories of Ethan as a child flooded back. His first day of school, his small hand in mine, the way he used to sneak into my bed when he was scared. I remembered the sacrifices I had made, working nights, skipping meals, saving every penny so he could go to college, cheering him on at every recital and game, consoling him when life didn't go his way. I realized that all of those moments had shaped him, and in some way, they were still part of him even if he had acted selfishly. I also reflected on my husband Robert, and how he had always believed in me, always supported me. His gentle encouragement became a quiet voice in my head, reminding me that I had survived before, and I could survive again. I started journaling more frequently, writing letters to myself, to Robert, even to Ethan. I didn't send them, they were for me, but it helped me process my feelings, to acknowledge the hurt, the betrayal, and the love I still felt. Months passed, and slowly, a rhythm returned to my life. I began volunteering at the local library, helping children with reading. Their curiosity and laughter reminded me of Ethan when he was little. I made small improvements to my home, filled it with warmth and light. I even started painting again, something I hadn't done since my youth. Each brush stroke, each color, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been lost in the emptiness. Through this process, I began to understand something crucial. Life isn't defined by what others take from you, but by what you choose to build for yourself. I didn't need the old furniture, or even Ethan's immediate presence to feel whole. I was discovering that my strength, my resilience, my ability to love and forgive were what truly mattered. And then came a moment I hadn't expected. I was walking through the park when I saw a mother and child very much like me and Ethan years ago. The little boy dropped his toy, and his mother bent down to pick it up. Their laughter reminded me of something I had almost forgotten: the pure, unfiltered joy of connection. I realized that life still offered moments of happiness, even after deep pain. One evening, I received another letter from Ethan. This time, his words were longer, more thoughtful. He wrote about how Paris had opened his eyes to life, about how he had made mistakes, and how he missed me every single day. He didn't ask for forgiveness yet, but his words hinted at understanding, at regret, at a desire to reconnect. I held that letter close for hours. I felt anger bubbling up, but I also felt something else, a quiet hope, fragile but real. Perhaps he had changed. Perhaps he understood what he had done wrong. Perhaps we could start again. In the weeks that followed, I began preparing not just my home, but myself. I cleaned and organized, not because I expected Ethan to return immediately, but because I wanted to feel ready. I wanted to meet him, not as a broken mother, but as someone who had grown stronger through her pain. I also began reflecting more deeply on forgiveness. I realized that forgiving Ethan wouldn't erase the hurt or the betrayal. It wouldn't undo the loneliness, the emptiness, or the days of tears. But forgiveness would free me from the weight I had been carrying, and it would open the door for healing, for connection, and for love to return in a healthier, more honest way, through volunteering, writing, painting, and simply living each day with intention. I found pieces of myself I had thought were lost. I rediscovered joys I had forgotten: the sound of birds in the morning, the warmth of a cup of tea, the simple pleasure of finishing a book in my favorite chair. These small moments reminded me that life still had meaning, even in the absence of someone I loved deeply. And finally, after months of rebuilding and self-discovery, I felt ready to face Ethan, not with anger, not with blame, but with an open heart. I had lived through heartbreak and loneliness, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. I understood that love could survive mistakes, and that forgiveness could be the bridge back to connection. After months of living in my little rebuilt world, I had finally begun to feel at peace with myself. My house was no longer empty. My days were full of small joys, routines, and connections I had neglected for so long. And yet, despite everything, there was a quiet space in my heart that still ached for my son. I thought about him constantly. Ethan, my boy, my baby, the child I had sacrificed everything for. I wondered if he thought about me too, or if Paris and his new life had completely erased the memories of our home, of our bond. I didn't know. I tried not to hope, because hope had been dangerous before. But sometimes, even when you tell yourself not to, hope finds its way in. And then, one late afternoon, as I was organizing my little bookshelf, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, thinking it might be a telemarketer or some random call. But something may be. A quiet whisper from the part of me that still longed for connection made me pick it up. Mom, his voice. It was him, Ethan. The sound of his voice made my hands tremble. It was familiar, yet distant, carrying the weight of years and mistakes. Mom, it's me. I know it's been a long time. I don't know where to start, but I want to try. I wanted to yell, to cry, to throw the phone across the room. I wanted to ask why he had sold everything, why he had left me alone. But instead, I felt a strange mixture of relief and caution. My voice was quiet when I finally spoke. Ethan, you have a lot to explain. He hesitated. I know I hurt you more than I can say. I made a terrible mistake, Mom, moving to Paris, selling your things. I thought I was doing the right thing at the time. I didn't think about how it would feel for you. I miss you every single day. I sat down on my little chair, gripping the edges like it was the only thing keeping me steady. For a moment, I didn't speak. My heart was pounding. I wanted to believe him, but a part of me was scared of hope, scared of disappointment. Finally, I whispered, Ethan, I've missed you too. But do you understand what you did? Do you understand how it felt to be left alone in this house, stripped of everything I loved? I do, he said, his voice cracked. I've thought about it every day. I regret it more than I can ever put into words. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I want a chance to make it right, to be your son again. We talked for hours that night, not about Paris, or furniture, or even the money. Those were just details. We talked about us, about our childhood memories, about the years that had stretched between us like a canyon. I listened as he recounted his regrets, his realizations, and the ways in which he had grown. And slowly, I began to feel the first fragile threads of connection returning. Over the next weeks, our conversations continued. Phone calls, emails, short messages. Each interaction was cautious. Each step required trust, and trust had to be rebuilt slowly. He didn't try to rush me, didn't pressure me. He simply shared his life, his experiences, his reflections, and most importantly, he listened to mine. I found myself remembering the boy he once was, the little boy who used to sit on my lap, ask endless questions, and dream big dreams. I began to forgive not because it erased the pain, but because it freed me. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. Forgiveness meant reclaiming my own peace and opening the door to the possibility of love again. One day, he suggested a visit. "Mom," he said, voice hesitant, "I know it might be too soon, but I'd like to see you, just to talk, to be here with you." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to run, to protect myself from more heartbreak. But another part, stronger, wiser, and braver, wanted to see him, to look into his eyes, and decide for myself if the love I had always had for him could survive the mistakes of the past. We agreed on a day. I prepared my little home, not as a showcase, but as a reflection of the life I had built, my small victories, my routines, my growth. When the doorbell rang that morning, my heart pounded like a drum. I opened the door, and there he was, Ethan, older now, more mature, but still the boy I had raised, still the son I loved. We stood there for a long moment, neither of us speaking. Then he stepped forward, and without hesitation, I wrapped my arms around him. His embrace was shaky, filled with years of regret, longing, and love. And in that moment, I realized that while the house had once been empty, my heart had been waiting for this connection to return. We sat together in my little living room, sipping tea, sharing stories, laughing and crying at the same time. Olivia joined us later, quietly and respectfully, giving us space while being a part of this tentative reunion. We didn't talk about Paris immediately, or the furniture, or the mistakes those would come in time. We talked about us, about family, about the bonds that even mistakes couldn't sever. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the house felt alive again, not because of the furniture, but because of the presence of my son, because of the laughter, the shared memories, and the fragile but growing trust. I realized something profound. Reconciliation doesn't erase the past. It doesn't erase the pain, but it does allow the heart to heal, to reconnect, and to love again, perhaps in a wiser, deeper, more honest way. And through it all, I discovered my own strength. I had survived betrayal, loneliness, and heartbreak. I had rebuilt my life from nothing, and now I could welcome my son back, not as a naive mother, but as a strong, loving woman who had weathered life's storms and emerged stronger. After months of rebuilding my life and slowly reconnecting with Ethan, the moment finally arrived for the reunion that would change everything. It wasn't just about furniture, money, or even the years lost. It was about the bond between a mother and her son, a bond that survived mistakes, betrayal, and time. The morning Ethan and Olivia were coming over, I woke up early, even though I didn't need to. I brewed my coffee, lit a small candle on the table, and glanced around my home. It wasn't fancy, and it wasn't the house I had once shared with Robert and Ethan, but it was warm. It was mine, and today it would become a place of healing. When they arrived, I heard Ethan's voice before I saw him. "Mom," he said softly, almost reverently, as if approaching something sacred. I opened the door and saw him standing there, older, taller, more mature, but still my boy. He looked nervous, hesitant, and sure of what the first words should be. But I knew. I could feel it in the way his eyes searched mine, the slight tremble in his hands, the way his posture spoke of regret and hope all at once. Without a word, I stepped forward and embraced him. And in that moment, all the months of pain, anger, and longing melted into tears and relief. He held me tightly, as though afraid to let go, and I held him just as tightly, feeling a lifetime of love that no betrayal could erase. We sat together in my little living room, the morning sun spilling through the windows, casting a golden glow over the room. For hours, we talked about mistakes, about regrets, about Paris, about the furniture, about the years that had passed between us, and the ways we had changed. Ethan spoke first. "Mom, I don't know how to make up for what I did. I can't change the past. I can't bring back the things I sold or the time I lost. But I want to be here now, and I want to be the son you deserve." I listened, feeling the weight of his words, and finally, I replied, "Ethan, I don't want to dwell on the past. It hurt, yes. It broke me, yes. But it also taught me something. It taught me that forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about choosing to love even when it's hard. And I choose to love you." Tears streamed down both our faces. We talked about everything, our memories, our regrets, our dreams. I shared with him the days I spent alone, the nights I cried, the moments I rebuilt my life. He listened, and I could see the guilt and the understanding in his eyes. For the first time in months, I felt the bond between us strengthen, mending slowly but surely. Olivia joined the conversation with humility and kindness, acknowledging the pain and showing her willingness to be part of this healing. It was awkward at first, but over time we laughed together, shared stories, and even prepared a meal as a family. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't the past restored, but it was a beginning. Over the following weeks, Ethan and Olivia visited often. We went to the park where I used to take Ethan as a boy. We baked together and even planted flowers in the front yard. Each day, the house felt more alive, not because of the furniture or the things I had lost, but because of the presence of love, connection, and family. I realized that forgiveness and healing are not single moments. They are a series of choices, small actions, and patient understanding. They are about accepting the flaws in others and even in ourselves, while holding on to love that transcends mistakes. One evening, after a long day of laughter and stories, I sat alone in my favorite chair. Looking around the living room, I saw the little table Ethan had brought, the chair I had painted myself, the small plants I had nurtured, and I felt a profound sense of peace. My house was no longer empty. My heart was no longer heavy. I was whole again, not because everything had been restored to what it was, but because love had found a way back into my life. Ethan came over and sat beside me. "Mom," he said quietly, "thank you for giving me another chance. I know I don't deserve it." I smiled, taking his hand in mine. "Ethan, we all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after. You came back. You tried, and that's what counts." And in that moment, I know our family was not perfect, and life would continue to challenge us. But we had learned something priceless. We had learned that love survives, that forgiveness heals, that even after heartbreak, there is hope, and even in loss, there is a chance to rebuild. The days went on, filled with laughter, conversations, and small, meaningful moments. Ethan became not just my son, but my companion in shared experiences. We talked about his future, my hopes for him, and the adventures we could still have together. Olivia became a trusted presence, not just as his wife, but as someone who valued and respected the bond between mother and son. I found myself reflecting on life more deeply than ever before. I had survived loss, betrayal, loneliness, and heartbreak. I had rebuilt myself, learned to love again, and discovered that the human heart is capable of immense resilience. And through it all, I realized that the strongest love is not always the easiest. It is the love that endures despite mistakes, challenges, and time. And so, here I am today, sharing my story with you. A story of heartbreak, resilience, and forgiveness. A story of a mother and her son. Of a house that was once empty, but is now filled with love again. A story that proves that even after the deepest pain, there is hope, there is healing, and there is joy. If my story touched your heart, please subscribe to my channel.